friends, if you're new to my channel, my name's Nicole and I'm here today with a review of the book and the film of the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. I said it right. So, if you don't know it, the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society is a book. It's an international bestseller, and it was just made into a film starring Lily James herself right there on my book cover. And I wanted to talk about both the book and then the film, and kind of the film as an adaptation of the book. I did this for The Woman in White, but talking about the musical of it, and so I thought that I would do this for this book. I'm absolutely 125% in love with both the book and the film, so I really want to get a chance to talk about them. I'm going to start by talking about the book. Now, the book is by Marianne Schaefer and Annie Barrows. Annie Barrows is Marianne Schaefer's niece who finished the book for her after she unfortunately had health problems and couldn't finish it herself. And it came out in 2008. It, like I said, is an international bestseller, and I have to say, I have the movie tie-in edition of the book, and one of the quotes on the front of it, you know how they do like quotes from reviews, is utterly delightful, said by Helen Mirren. So when like Helen Mirren is one of your book quotes, you know you've done something right. But it's actually been my mother's favorite book for several years now, and I feel kind of ashamed that I didn't read it before now. But I saw the movie on a Saturday with my friend Rhiannon. On Monday we went out and bought the book because we decided to buddy read it together, and I had finished it by Friday. It's that good. I read it in under a week, and I'm proper obsessed with it. I think I'm going to reread the book again soon. I know my mom's read it like 6 or 7 or 8 times. I feel like it's something that will lend itself well to rereading. So the book is an epistolary novel, I think is how it's said, which means it's in letter format, which I typically don't like that much. But these letters are so utterly delightful. I also like that they kind of differ who they're to and from. Like a bunch of different characters are writing letters to each other. It's definitely not the same every time. Some of them are telegrams, some of them are long letters, some of them are very short letters. There's one point where Juliet sends her best friend like 4 letters in a row being like, "Why haven't you written me back?" Which was honestly wildly relatable. This novel is so heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time. Now, what the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society is about is, it's the story of Juliet Ashton, who's this writer who lives in London. She's kind of made a name for herself off of this book that this kind of humor book that she wrote during the war and based on her column. And she kind of wants to branch out and do something different. It's set in post-war Britain. I think it's 1946, so the war has just ended. Everyone in London is kind of still adapting back to not being in wartime anymore. And now Juliet begins corresponding with this man Dawsey, who lives on the Isle of Guernsey. Now, if you didn't know, and I didn't, Guernsey actually was occupied by the Nazi forces during the war, as were the rest of the Channel Islands. The Channel Islands are islands that belong to the UK, but sit kind of along the coast of France. And I actually knew very little about the occupation during World War II. But so the book kind of goes back and forth, and the movie goes back and forth between Dawsey and then a bunch of other people from the island telling Juliet about the occupation. And it's kind of centered around this Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which was a kind of book club formed by some people on the island, including Dawsey, as kind of a cover-up for what they were actually doing on the night that they were caught out after curfew by some Nazi soldiers. But they form this society and they start using it as a book club. And so one of the big themes of the novel is kind of escapism and the way that reading can help us get through a really difficult time, and kind of how these people use the book club as a way to like make it through the occupation and kind of keep their hopes up, I guess. But it's a really beautiful story. There's so many just delightful characters, all of whom I want to like be my actual friends or adopt me, or I want to adopt. There's 2 adorable children, Kit and Eli, I think is his name. There's Eben, who is kind of like the ultimate granddad. There's Amelia, who's this amazing woman who's kind of like in charge of the society. There's Dawsey, who's this pig farmer who really loves Charles Lamb and loves reading and is just utterly charming. There's Isola, who's my personal favorite. Isola is hilarious. She's kind of this unmarried woman on the island who like brews different tonics and stuff and is kind of out there and crazy and eccentric, kind of a Luna Lovegood character, if you will. But she's like obsessed with the Brontes. She discovers Pride and Prejudice during the course of the novel and is obsessed with it. And then Juliet herself is so wonderfully funny and delightful and empathetic and just everything that you would ever want in a main character. And one of my other favorite characters is her publisher and best friend Sydney, who is kind of the head of the publishing company, but he's also her other best friend's older brother, so he's kind of been a brotherly figure to her, and their friendship is just adorable, and I love it. There's also, Juliet has this boyfriend back in London named Mark, who is kind of the worst. I don't think that's like a spoiler to tell you that. Pretty much from the moment you meet him, you know that he's not grand news. But that's also kind of a really funny thing to read about, some of like the stuff that he does. He's American, and kind of I think the attitude of an American in post-war London is maybe not. I think it's a very interesting thing to see kind of how the Americans dealt with the aftermath of the war in a different way in some ways, because it had not really been fought on their shores. But in any case, it's got these delightful characters, this vivid imagery. Like, I honestly kind of felt like I'd been to Guernsey after I finished reading it, even though I've never set foot there. Although now I really want to go, and I hear it's very beautiful. It's also incredibly informative, though. I feel like I learned so much about the occupation of the Channel Islands, even though obviously I didn't learn a lot of like hard facts, but just stuff about what it actually meant to live on the island. And I know that the authors did a lot of research so that they could kind of portray it realistically. And I also felt like I learned a lot about post-war Britain, because it's not a period I've ever studied. It's not a period I know much about, because I think it was a very different experience in the States, because we were able to kind of, you know, come out of the war and immediately go out of rationing, and everything kind of went back to normal. And the 50s were like a really grand time in America. But Britain was still dealing with the fact that, you know, in London, like, there was bomb wreckage everywhere from the Blitz, and rationing went on for years. And it's just something that I'd never really thought about before, so I really enjoyed that. But this is definitely one of my favorite books I've ever read. 10 out of 10. Have added it to my favorites bookshelf on Goodreads. So I highly, highly recommend this. It's also a fairly fast read, partially because of the letter format. So honestly, I would recommend it to anyone. Anyone with an interest in World War II, or post-war Britain, or Guernsey, or just a really heartwarming, beautiful story. Now, the movie is out now in Britain. I believe it's still in theaters some places, and it's not getting a cinematic release in the States and in Latin America and some other countries. It's going straight to Netflix, and it will be on Netflix, I believe August 10th is the last that I had seen. I've actually been thinking about going for a cheeky second trip, but I'm trying not to because movies are very expensive. The film is directed by Mike Newell, who you might know as the director of Four Weddings and a Funeral, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Mona Lisa's Smile, really diverse range of work, and I think he does a beautiful job with this film. It's really, really cinematically beautiful. It wasn't filmed in Guernsey. I think it was filmed in the UK. I can't remember exactly where, but some gorgeous scenery shots. The costuming is amazing. All the locations are amazing. It does feel quite British in style, which I really enjoy, but it's honestly just a really lovely post-war period drama, the likes of which I've not seen very much, but I think it's a beautiful film. I want to start out by talking about the cast some. So this movie actually came onto my radar in the first place because it has two actresses that I'm incredibly fond of in it, Jessica Brown Findlay and Lily James. As a matter of fact, if I had to make a list of my top 5 TV and film actresses, I think they would both be on it. The other 3 being Natalie Dormer, Holly Granger, and Daisy Ridley. So I was thrilled from the start, and I think that Lily James is the perfect Juliet. I can't imagine anyone else in that part. Originally, the film was meant to be directed by Kenneth Branagh, starring Kate Winslet, but I really, really enjoy Lily James' portrayal of Juliet. I think she brings the right kind of empathy to all of her characters, and there's also something quite intelligent about her, which makes sense because Juliet's a writer, she's very well read, and I think that she just plays it so well. She brings so much emotion to the role, and I think that she is, really good at that kind of emotional acting. So she completely sold me on it. She's delightful. The film also has Michael Huisman, I'm probably saying that wrong, I think it's a Dutch name, as Dossie Adams, who's kind of the love interest. He's as I mentioned before, like a pig farmer who loves to read, really loves Charles Lamb, and he is who starts corresponding with Juliet, which is what brings her to the island in the first place, because he's found her name and address in a secondhand book and has written to her asking if she can tell him kind of more about Charles Lamb and where he can write to try and get a copy sent to him from a bookstore. And because of this correspondence, she ends up going to Guernsey to meet him and to meet the other members of the Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. And I thought that he did a fantastic job in the role. It's, I think, in some ways a hard role because Dossie's quite soft-spoken. He's quite, I don't know if shy is the right word, but, he's not he doesn't have a very big personality in a lot of ways, and I think he's a wonderful foil to Lily James's Juliet, and just brings a lot of really beautiful, subtle acting to the role. There is this character named Elizabeth Mckenna, and Elizabeth is only ever seen in flashbacks and in other people's stories. And Elizabeth is this beautiful, brave, amazing young woman who was living on the Isle and ended up getting in some trouble with the Germans and was sent to a camp in Europe. And so she's kind of this character in the film of kind of intrigue and mystery. And you feel close to her, I think, in the same way that Juliet does, even though you never really get to meet her. But she is played wonderfully by Jessica Brown Findlay. Now, if you've seen Downton Abbey, I think that there's a lot of similarities actually between the character of Elizabeth Mckenna and Lady Sybil, who Jessica Brown Findlay played on Downton Abbey. And I think I honestly can't imagine anyone else doing the part as well as she does. She's got that something just so perfect about her that, makes her really good for these characters who are so kind, yet so defiant and brave at the same time. And I just was so pleased with her in the role. Glen Powell is appropriately wonderful to hate in the role of Mark. I thought that he actually made the role really great because he's somehow charming, but you feel like there's no substance behind it, which I feel like is fairly apt for Mark, actually. I've got my notes here with the cast. Catherine Parkinson is the perfect Isola. I thought she was splendid. There were so many parts where Rhiannon and I would turn to each other and be like, oh my god, same. She's so good. She's perfectly captures that kind of kookiness that's so endearing, because I think that's the thing about Isola, is that she's kind of a strange character, but in a really endearing and lovely way. One of my favorite performances in it, who really isn't in it enough, though I understand why, is Matthew Goode as Sidney. I love Matthew Goode, and yes, if you're wondering, this film does have 4 Downton Abbey cast members, a bit of a reunion, I guess, but he is really lovely as Juliet's best friend and publisher, Sidney. I think he brings such a charm to the role, and is honestly, I can't imagine, even if I'd read the novel before I watched the movie, I feel like that's exactly what I would have pictured for Sidney. And finally, Penelope Wilton is incredible as Amelia. Amelia is this kind of older woman on the island who was very close to Elizabeth Mckenna and is really kind of shaken by everything that's happened during the war. And she kind of takes Juliet under her wing in a way, and I just can't imagine anyone better than Penelope Wilton for the role. Now, one of the things I wanted to discuss was the film as an adaptation of the book, and there are really significant changes from the book to the film. Obviously, for starters, the book is told through letters, whereas in the film you're watching everything happen. But I think that they still perfectly captured the tone and the feeling that you get from the book, which is not always easy to do. Like I said, there's a lot of changes. Some of them are that, there's so many characters in the book, like the Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society has so many members, whereas they whittle it down to kind of a core group in the film, which makes a lot of sense. One of the big changes is that in the book, they immediately have, Juliet immediately has their permission to write a story and then finally a book about the society, whereas in the film, while Dossie's okay with it, Amelia tells her that she can't write about it, and I don't want to give away why that is, but I think it actually makes a lot of sense the way that they did it, and it also created more conflict, because it is one of those books that doesn't really have the right amount of conflict in it for a 2-hour film. They also, of course, played around with the timeline a lot. Juliet comes to Guernsey a lot sooner in the film than she does in the book, although I think that makes a lot of sense, and I was happy to spend more time on the Isle of Guernsey with her. But there's also the way that it's structured is quite different in the film, because there are things that you find out kind of in the middle of the novel that are kind of held off to be big dramatic reveals in the book, like what happened to Elizabeth Mckenna, whereas someone tells Juliet before she ever comes to Guernsey. In the book, it's kind of a big deal that it's this kind of unsaid thing that she finally finds out later on in the film. There's also what happens to Elizabeth Mckenna after the war, which is a huge reveal kind of towards the very end, actually, of the film, but you find out a lot sooner in the book, and it's not quite as dramatic. But I actually kind of liked those two big things being reveals, and that's why I would say most of the time, you hear like, oh, read the book before you go see the movie. I actually think this is a really good movie to see before you read the book. Now, obviously, if you've already read the book, I would still recommend seeing the movie. But if you've not read the book, I would say see the movie first, because that way you'll get this big dramatic reveals that occur, and then I don't think, the book is different enough that you won't really miss out on anything because of it. Now, I think what this movie has done is, even though there's a lot of changes in timeline and characters and different stuff, it's really captured all the main characters so well, and it's also captured the feeling that you get whenever you read the book, and I just think that it matches it perfectly in that. Now, if you've read this book, if you've seen this film, I would love it if you would let me know in the comments, because I would love to have a discussion with it, because I don't know enough people who've seen it. Definitely give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and if you'd like to see more videos kind of about book to movie or book to musical adaptations, because I would definitely be interested in filming more. If you want to follow me on social media, I will put links to those and to my blog down below, and I'll see you again next week. Have a great day. Bye!